Good Thursday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining Sports4CLE. Indians getting ready to open up a series against the New York Yankees over at Progressive Field. A 4-game series. We'll go through the weekend. We're going to talk plenty of Browns, though. Tim Bielik, draft expert, will be joining us a little bit later in the show. We begin by welcoming in Dan Labbe. He is Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. Dan, draft a week away from today is the first round of this draft. How do the Browns win the draft, if you will? What would be the dream scenario for the Browns to get ready for the season with this draft?
Well, a dream scenario could be a guy like J.C. Horn falling to them or falling to them in a place where they could maybe pick him. But if we're dealing in a world of reality, I put up a post today on cleveland.com where I had them taking Greg Newsome at number 26. If he's there, the corner from Northwestern, there are some durability concerns, which, might scare you off a little. But if he's healthy, he can start, and I think start quickly. And that's what you need if you're going to take a corner, especially at 26. And then I love the idea of taking an edge rusher at 59 if a guy like Peyton Turner is there, which is the guy that I chose at number 59 for this team. I think he checks so many boxes for this Browns team. He can play inside and outside. He is an outside rusher, but he can play on the inside a little bit like Jadavian Clowney. He might need a little seasoning, which is okay because you built this defensive line where you can take a guy that doesn't need to start week one. But his testing, his size, his versatility, if you get that guy at 59, he could be a real steal.
You look at what the Browns likely will do with that 26th pick. It seems more and more likely the more you hear that it is probably going to be a cornerback. It's come out that they really would like to play a lot of 3 cornerback, 3 safeties, which doesn't surprise anybody.
And I just think when you look at the roster, that's the one area where you kind of see a hole still. You might really love Greedy Williams and think Greedy Williams is going to come back and be great. But the reality is we've seen Greedy Williams in his rookie year. He was okay. And then we didn't see Greedy Williams at all last year. And we don't know what Greedy Williams is going to come back and be. And this team, they're trying to win a Super Bowl. They're trying to make a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. And you've got to think like just, gamble at a really important position like cornerback too. If Greedy Williams is back and he wins that job and he's the best guy for it, great. But you also should look at a guy at 26 if there's a guy there that you think can come in and start really quickly for you.
Any scenario where you think they trade up to try to get a guy like say J.C. Horn slides, into the 18, 19 range where you don't have to give up a ton. Do you potentially try to go up and get, one of those quote unquote elite cornerbacks in this draft? There's 3, 4 of them.
I would do it. If J.C. Horn gets past, like you were saying, kind of into that range, maybe past 15, and maybe it's not going to cost you a ton to move up. Maybe one of those extra thirds this year. Maybe you have to give up a second next year, but if this team is as good as they think they're going to be, that second next year is going to be closer to a third anyway. And you can get a guy like J.C. Horn who can come in and, like I said, start right away, but he's also going to be your second corner for a long time. You're going to have that cost control for the first 4 years of his deal. I would absolutely get aggressive and move up to get a guy like that if he falls out of that top 15.
What do you think the chances are of the Browns taking a wide receiver early in the draft?
I wouldn't rule anything out with this front office. I think the flexibility that they've built into this roster is they're pretty much set. Outside of what we talked about, cornerback too, and you can even still make an argument that they're fine with Greedy Williams and that's what they're going to do. I wouldn't put anything past this group. If there's a receiver there, Rashad Bateman is a guy that I've kind of circled. Look, you can plan for the future and also still have a guy that can help you this year, because the reality is you've got Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry, both approaching 30. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't been healthy for a while. So, you're kind of banking on him coming back, but you just don't know for sure how he's going to come back. So if you can add a receiver at 26 and that's the best player available, I wouldn't argue with doing that.
Is Bateman a guy who you think kind of fits that mold of what they would be looking for?
I think he is. And I think he's a guy that you look at, not just like you did, when they took Donovan Peoples-Jones in the 6th round last year, that was a flyer. And you can make the argument that they've already hit on that pick. No matter what Peoples-Jones does, even the rest of his career, he won you a football game or helped you win a football game in Cincinnati. He was a productive receiver for a 6th round pick. That's great value already. If you take Bateman, you're thinking long-term. You're thinking a guy that could eventually be a number one receiver for you. And I think Bateman checks those boxes.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Rashad Bateman. He was working out in preparation for the draft with Odell Beckham Jr., and he kind of shared some of the things via his Instagram account, him and Odell training, and he said he was all ears listening to Odell Beckham Jr. So there's some kind of thing there where, Bateman has his eyes on being an elite receiver without question.
And one of the things I really like about these two receivers the Browns have, and Beckham and Landry, is they're both so willing to kind of help guys out who are coming up. Donovan Peoples-Jones actually kind of coincidentally met Jarvis Landry last year during the draft process and was working out with him. And Jarvis told a story last year about he didn't actually see the pick happen. And then like 10 minutes later, he sees texts and he started to get really excited about it. So Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry love to kind of help the guys that are coming up and help that group of guys that are next. We've seen it with the Browns. We've seen it in a situation like this with Rashad Bateman and Odell. And, like we've talked about, who knows if Bateman is sitting there at 26, maybe Odell's going to have an opportunity to help him develop even more.
Do you think it's unlikely that Beckham and Landry are both on this roster after 2021? Just because you've got all the extensions that are due, and you've got two wide receiver number ones that are getting paid, $30 million together.
It's really difficult to envision them both being here past this season. And you've also got to look at the players they are, right? If Beckham comes back and he's healthy and he looks like Odell Beckham Jr., then that's great. And you want him on your roster. But if he comes back and he just can't get over those leg injuries again, that makes it even more difficult to keep him on the roster. And Jarvis Landry, as great as he's been, and I will pound the table for how important Jarvis Landry has been for this team, and keeping him on the roster as long as you possibly can, he is limited in some of the things that he can do for you at the cost you're paying him. So it's going to be really hard as this roster gets more expensive to have that $30 million invested in those two wide receivers who are turning 30 very soon. And you've got to make decisions. At some point, there's going to be a correction on this roster. And the guys that are the most expensive are going to be the guys at the premium positions like quarterback, defensive end, which we've already seen them pay Myles Garrett, cornerback, and wide receiver, I think is a little higher up the list, but it's not quite that high.
And again, you and I get a lot of flack when we mention, they can't afford wide receivers, two of them at $15 million. And we're not saying they're not good players. We're just saying the salary cap makes you make choices, and the way this is set up, those probably aren't the choices the Browns front office is going to make.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's nothing against either player. Odell Beckham, when he's healthy, is one of the best wide receivers in the game. Jarvis Landry, different type of receiver, but same argument. When he's healthy, and he almost always is, he's one of the best wide receivers in the game. But $30 million in two guys, when you've got to pay your quarterback, you've got to pay your corner, you've already paid your edge rusher. You're going to have Jedrick Wills is going to come up eventually. Now that's down the road, but eventually you're going to have to start paying him. The way they pay this roster has to flip a little bit, and it's just not sustainable to keep these two guys together for that much longer.
Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we take a look at the question, who is more important to the Browns next year, Jadavian Clowney or Odell Beckham Jr.? Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns with Plain Dealer and cleveland.com Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe. So, Dan, I put the question to you. Who is more important to the Browns' success, Jadeveon Clowney or Odell Beckham Jr.?
It's such a fun question. And you can make such a compelling case for either guy. For me, it's Jadavian Clowney, because I think if he has one of those like 9.5 sack seasons like he had in Houston, it changes the dynamic of this defensive line. You've got two guys now on the edge, and then Clowney, a guy that can move inside. It just changes what this defensive line looks like. And I think it's easy to forget, but this defensive line last year did not produce a ton of sacks. This was not a team that was just harassing quarterbacks over and over again. I think we get caught up a little bit in how great Myles Garrett was. The rest of the line, though, just didn't always deliver. Some of it was health and things like that. But Clowney's super important. Odell Beckham is a dynamic player. We talked about him in the first segment. He's a great player, one of the best receivers in the game when he's healthy. But there are things he does that you might be able to replicate. You can find a downfield threat somewhere. You can find some of those quick passes somewhere. Is it going to be to the level of Odell Beckham Jr.? No. But you can kind of find good enough to sort of fill some of those roles that you get out of Odell Beckham Jr. So I think Jadeveon Clowney, of those two, him coming back and being the player he was in Houston than anything, I think is more important.
Yeah, and again, if Odell Beckham is Odell Beckham, that offense is going to be going. If Jadeveon Clowney comes back to the level he was when he was playing opposite J.J. Watt in Houston, now all of a sudden you have the defensive line giving the type of pressure everybody thought they were going to get last year that they just weren't able to do. They weren't able to generate the pressure that you thought that line would be able to generate.
Yeah, Beckham takes your offense, which was already pretty good, and potentially takes it from good to one of the best offenses in the league. There's no debating that. Clowney could take your defense, though, especially when you combine it with how much better they're going to be in the back end. Clowney and Garrett combined could take your defense, and from what was a defense that was 20th in the league, and now you might start talking about a top 10 level defense. And it's not just because of Clowney, but it's because of how he fits on that line and his ability to be disruptive, and how that's going to benefit Myles Garrett and how that's going to benefit everybody else on that defense.
Yeah, without question. And again, people get all caught up in sacks, and they're important. That's what gets a guy paid. If he can set the edge, play well against the run, and keep guys like Lamar Jackson from running all over against the Browns, he's worth the investment, and I think that's what the Browns are banking on more so than, double-digit sack totals.
Right, and then that's a big piece of it. You've got to face Lamar Jackson twice this year. You're going to have to face Ben Roethlisberger twice this year. I don't know if Roethlisberger is going to look more like Roethlisberger this year or not, but you do still have to face him twice this year. And you're going to have to face Joe Burrow twice this year. And if Joe Burrow is back and healthy, he's got a chance to be a really good quarterback in his second year. And then on top of all that, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, they're playing some really good quarterbacks on this schedule. Kyler Murray. So you need a guy on that edge that can help Myles out.
Without question. Now, this one's going to be a little bit fun, too. These are 3 bold predictions for the Browns' 2021 season. This one coming from brownsnation.com. So we have 3 of them. And remember, these are bold predictions. First one, Jadeveon Clowney makes the Pro Bowl. What do you think?
I don't think I would make that prediction. I think Jadeveon Clowney can have a really good year, and I think he can be productive. We talk, you mentioned the sack numbers. They aren't always very high. I think a top year for him is probably in that 9 to 9.5 range. I don't know if that puts him in the Pro Bowl. So I don't know if I would make that prediction. I think Clowney can have a really good year and help this team without making the Pro Bowl, and I think that's more likely what happens.
Now, if Clowney does have a Pro Bowl type year, I'm thinking it means pretty good things for this Browns defense.
It means great. It takes this Browns defense to an even higher level because now you've got two guys who could potentially have double-digit sacks. And if you've got bookend Pro Bowlers on that line, especially what the Browns are paying for Clowny, they get a steal in that department.
So here's bold prediction number 2, BrownsNation.com. Beckham gets over 1,200 yards. So Odell Beckham over 1,200 yards.
All right, I'm going to keep being a downer on this one. I don't know if he gets over 1,200. It's just hard for me to see that. Even a couple of years ago when they didn't have all the weapons they have now, he didn't get to 1,200 yards. He's coming off that ACL. I do think it's going to take a little time for him to get completely right. And that with all the weapons, all the guys that they have, they're going to have to distribute this football to so many different players. I just don't know if the opportunities are going to be there for him to get quite that high up. Again, like Clowny, the numbers might not be there, but Beckham can still have a good year. I don't think he'll get 1,200 yards.
But again, if Beckham has 1,200 yards, this offense is going to be one of the better ones in the NFL without question.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the third one, and this one's interesting. Mayfield joins the MVP conversation. Baker Mayfield in the MVP conversation.
Okay, so here's why this one makes sense. If the Browns are as good as we think they can be, if they're contenders to win the AFC, and let's say Baker Mayfield goes to Arrowhead on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football and he beats Patrick Mahomes, and the Browns are going to be in a bunch of prime time, high-profile football games this year. Let's say he gets the best of Lamar Jackson finally this year once or twice, and the Browns win 12 games, or even 11, 12, 13 games in that range. They're one of the best teams in the AFC. That kind of makes your quarterback an MVP candidate. So I actually think this is plausible. If Baker Mayfield plays like he did from about Thanksgiving on, and the Browns are really good, and he wins some high-profile games, that buzz is going to start to build. So of all these predictions, and it might kind of be crazy to think this, I could see a scenario where that really happens and he ends up in the MVP discussion.
Yeah, if he takes care of the football and throws, the touchdown passes, Kevin Stefanski is much more comfortable with his skill set. And I think you're going to see the offense tailored behind him a little bit more.
And it's really important to note that when he was playing well in the back half of the season, that offense became more and more pass heavy. They were throwing the ball more earlier in football games and not leaning on the run as much. And I think ultimately that's what this offense is going to look like. You've got an analytics-driven front office, a coaching staff that buys into that. They're going to throw the ball more early in games. And so Baker Mayfield is going to have opportunities early this season that he maybe didn't have last season when they didn't have a full offseason program. They were just getting used to everybody. They were kind of installing on the run, so they kind of leaned on that run game. They're going to be able to be a little pass heavy early on in the year as opposed to last year.
And if Baker Mayfield does that, he is going to cash in on a really nice extension following the end of that season if they don't sign him during it. And you know what? The Browns will happily write that check.
Oh, yeah. When you find your quarterback, you'll write that check every day of the week. And I've said it could be a win-win to wait because Baker can kind of sit back, let his guys get paid, be the ultimate teammate. Hey, I let all you guys get paid. I'll wait a year. I'll put it off a year because it's all about winning. And then he goes out and has the type of season he's capable of having. Now he's looking at that Dak Prescott contract and saying, all right, Andrew Berry, write me that kind of check.
Dan Labbe and I, time to take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will take a look at a mock draft that was all trades. This one will be interesting. Has the Browns trading away their first-round pick? We'll tell you who they get. Plus some free agents still out there that people think the Browns should sign. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, Go to try-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with cleveland.com and Plain Dealer Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe. And Dan, this one's interesting. Bill Barnwell, ESPN, came up with a all-trade mock draft, which that's a new one on me, and we follow these things. So he has the Browns getting the third pick, the 67th overall, and the 2022 first-round pick of the Houston Texans, and giving up the 26th overall pick and the 89th pick, which is a third-round pick. So a third-round pick earlier in the third round they get this year. They give up 26 in a later third round, but they get the 2022 first-round pick of the Houston Texans. Initially, I'm like, they're not trading the 22nd pick. And as I thought about it, that Texans pick could be awfully high in the draft. Just a thought on that one.
It's very intriguing. I hate the idea of waiting to make your first pick until that late on day two, but you throw out that idea of maybe getting a top 5, top 3 pick. And the Browns have had good luck trading with the Texans. They made that trade back in 2017 when the Texans took Deshaun Watson, and it wasn't going their way. Deshaun Watson ended up tearing his ACL. They ended up getting the number 4 pick in Denzel Ward. This one could end up pretty high up in next year's draft. And here's the other thing to remember. I bet if it does, let's say it ends up at 1 or 2, I would bet the Browns wouldn't make that pick. That they would take that 1 or 2 pick and turn it into even more draft capital down the road. So if Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta's eyes get wide about this, it would be because they're looking at not just what they could get from the Texans, but then what they could flip it into moving forward and how much draft capital they could have in future years.
And the other thing is this year there's a lot of concern because guys opted out of the season. You have guys that didn't play full seasons. There's just not the normal picture that you get of a draft prospect. And I think some teams are going to be more likely to trade out of this year's draft. I don't know that the Browns are going to be one of them, but I could see where teams definitely trade out of this draft.
Yeah, it's just hard to get a read on some of these guys. Even, we talked about the little mock draft that I put together earlier. Some of these guys, it was just so hard. We're talking about guys that haven't played since 2019 in some cases. There was no combine. You're going off pro day stuff, and it's really difficult. The other thing is, at 26, yes, you can get a very good player at 26, but the deeper you go in the draft, even still in the first round, it's always more of a roll of the dice. You just don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, the Browns took David Njoku a couple years ago, and that was a fine pick, but then a pick later, TJ Watt went, right? It's always just a roll of a dice as to how a guy's going to develop, how he's going to fit into your system. And the later you get, even if you're still in the first round, it just becomes harder and harder to identify the right guys.
Nice problem to have, though. Drafting late in the first round means your team played pretty well the year before. So, I think Browns fans could get used to this. All right, we're going to move on to some free agents that the Browns should consider ahead of the draft. This is by Fansided. First one, defensive tackle Maurice Hurst. Thoughts on that one?
That one is interesting because, Daniel Jeremiah was on a conference call the other day, and he said that this is one of the worst defensive tackle classes that he's seen. So if you're choosing between maybe bringing in a veteran guy that and that you've recently scouted, he's still young, he's probably not going to be super expensive, I could see maybe wanting to do that instead of drafting a guy if you don't think that guy's going to pan out. So I'd be interested in Mo Hurst if he wanted to come here, and maybe this depends on what happens with Sheldon Richardson ultimately, if he comes back or not. But yeah, I think Mo Hurst is a very good fit with this Browns roster. Next
one is a wide receiver used to have some speed, Kenny Stills. What do you think of that one?
I'm just not that excited about signing a wide receiver. We talked about drafting a wide receiver potentially at 26, and I'd be okay with that because, you have that cost control. You have the guy locked up for 4 or 5 years, depending on if you pick up that option or not. And you're kind of thinking about the future a little bit. I just don't think they need to add a guy like Kenny Stills, who would be more of a short-term option. You're already kind of trying to figure out how you're going to get the football in a lot of guys' hands already. So I'd rather see them, if they don't draft a wide receiver early, I'd rather just see them add someone later in the draft and let that guy sit and develop than bring in another veteran wideout.
And they appear to really like Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you bring Kenny Stills in, it's probably going to be at the expense of playing time for Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, and people need to remember, you've got 5 guys you can have on the field outside of the offensive line and the quarterback. And when you start to list guys, right, like Jarvis Landry's not coming off the field. Odell Beckham's not coming off the field. Are you taking Nick Chubb off the field? Probably not too much. You start running out of those slots a little bit. So you've got to be mindful of that as you project how many receivers, tight ends, running backs you actually have.
The last one on this list, linebacker Avery Williamson. Kind of thoughts on that?
This is another one that I'm not sure if it's a great fit. I was kind of looking at some of his coverage grades on PFF, and I certainly know those grades aren't always perfect, but he's not a particularly great coverage linebacker. I think that's something they value in the position. And again, I just think this is one of those positions you can address at some point in the draft. Maybe they surprise all of us and take a Zaven Collins or a Jamin Davis early in the draft. But I also think they can probably find a guy later in the draft who can help them at linebacker, who fits a little more of what they're looking for. And also, let's not forget, Jacob Phillips was a 3rd-round pick last year, and I think there's going to be some high expectations for him this season.
Yeah, his rookie year was uneven. There were plays where you looked at him and like, yeah, this guy can play, and then there were others where it's like, boy, it really needs to work on that.
Yeah, he had these little flashes here and there where you thought, okay, maybe the Browns really found something here. But that's sort of how Andrew Berry views the draft. Guys don't necessarily have to come in and be superstars right away. It takes some time to develop. So let a guy like Jacob Phillips come in, get some playing time, see what you have, 3rd-round pick, and now this year's kind of the year where you want to see him settle in and make that leap.
Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Dan mentioned you should be able to get a good player at 26. We'll take a look at what history shows us as far as the 26th pick has been. We'll also take a look at a consensus mock draft and who the Browns have. CBS Sports put one together. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with cleveland.com and Plain Dealer Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe. So, Dan, 26th overall, and we're going to scroll through these at the bottom, and some of these names are a little frightening, to be honest with you. When you look at the 26th overall pick, not a number of them have hit. Now, Montez Sweat from the Redskins is pretty good. Calvin Ridley from the Falcons is really good. Then you get down to Paxton Lynch, Rashad Perriman. I mean, it's very much a mixed bag. It just goes to show you, a lot of times you're throwing a dart at 26.
Yeah, the draft has always been an inexact science. Browns fans don't need to be told about that. And when you get later and later in that draft, you're taking some chances on guys. And the nice thing is you're not looking for a quarterback, so you're not going to be taking Jordan Love. You're not going to be taking Paxton Lynch. What I'm seeing, though, with some of these guys is they've sort of had to go someplace else to find their success. Rashad Perriman actually finally kind of put it together, but he needed to get cut and get a chance in Cleveland before he had a chance. Takk McKinley is trying to do that this year with the Browns. It's just really difficult, and it's why really smart teams, we're finding more and more, and this is something the Ravens do a lot of, and they're as analytically driven as any team in football. The Browns are in this boat as well. It's why they like to have more draft picks to kind of throw more of those darts and see if they can hit. If everybody's hitting between 50 and 60% on their picks, the thinking is the more picks you have, the more guys you might be able to find.
Yeah, without question. Now, historically, number 26, the year the Browns left and moved to Baltimore, they picked a guy named Ray Lewis at 26. So that one worked out pretty well. If you can find a Ray Lewis at 26, you're doing something.
Right, is this where we make the case for just picking a linebacker at 26? Because it happened, it worked for the team that used to be the Browns back in 1999. You can get a really good player, and this is where a good GM gets tested. Andrew Berry's not going to hit on every pick. He's not going to hit on every free agent. He might miss on this number 26 pick. But this is where you get tested over time. When you have these opportunities, are you able to take advantage of them and continue to add good players to your roster over the long term?
Yeah, if you can hit at the back end of the first draft, you sustain success. That's how, the Steelers are perennially good. That's how the Ravens have become perennially good. You're hitting on the back half of the first round with your draft picks.
And you can look at some of these contenders and see what they've done. I mean, you mentioned the Steelers, and I mentioned T.J. Watt earlier. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy that the Chiefs picked last year that they really like at that running back position, and they knew they kind of needed that, so they went out and they addressed it. In Buffalo, they landed one of their top corners, Tre'Davious White, a few picks before the Browns picked in that same draft back in 2017. So you're going to be able to add guys, and it helps with this Browns organization that they know exactly what they need. They know they have veterans in place, so you're not picking a guy you're going to have to throw out on the field too early. And so you're going to really be able to do this the right way. Pick a guy at 26. If he's ready week one and he wins the job, great. But if he's not, then he can take some time because you built this roster the right way.
Yeah, that's the advantage that the Browns appear to have now that they didn't have in years past. They know what system. By knowing what system, you know what kind of players you're looking for. That's the key to success for the Ravens and the Steelers drafting. And hopefully, it appears Andrew Berry and this regime knows what they want.
Yeah, it's funny how kind of being together and being on the same page makes a difference, and how a GM going to the coach and saying, hey, what does your offense look like? Okay, let's bring in guys that look like that. And now he can go to Joe Woods. What do you need on that defense? It's not Andrew Berry sitting in his office drawing up plays on the whiteboard or anything like that. He's picking guys for the coaches who call the plays, who put the systems in place. And we saw it work really well on the offensive side of the ball last year. And I think we're going to see it work really well on the defensive side of the ball this year.
So we're going to shift our focus back to mock draft just for a moment. So CBS Sports.com, a consensus mock draft, took 13 mock drafts into account, put them through the computer, and they came out with the Browns taking Jamin Davis. And Zaven Collins still on the board, went a couple picks later. I'm not sure I see Davis as being a fit for what they want to do.
It feels to me like if you're going to take one of those two guys, it would be Zaven Collins. We've talked so much about linebacker and whether this team values it or not. But at the same time, they could turn around and surprise us all and still take a linebacker at 26. I wouldn't rule it out. I know they used one of their visits on Jadeveon Clowney, so that tells you that he's at least a guy they are a little bit intrigued by. He has so many great traits. He covers well. He's big, and I think can play a little defensive end if you want him to on occasion. That's probably the way I would go, but it's also not surprising to see Jamin Davis pop up in this consensus draft because I have seen him linked to the Browns in a number of mock drafts, and I always find it a little bit surprising. I think ultimately, even though we might think this team doesn't value linebacker, if there's a dude there with just a bunch of traits and he's clearly the best player on the board and one of the corners all the corners they really like are gone, it wouldn't surprise me if they went linebacker just because, they're looking for that versatility. And if a guy has traits, versatility, checks those boxes, they might surprise us all and take a guy like that.
There's reports that Collins is bulked up to like 270, which would give you an indication that he's thinking more along the lines or hearing that he might be a valuable edge rusher type.
Yeah, and I think at his pro day he was 260. So yeah, if he's bulked up to 270, that means even more that he could really put his hand in the dirt and play edge. And I think that makes him a more valuable player. And again, going back to those PFF grades, he didn't have a lot of pass rush snaps last season, but he did grade really well when they looked at him and gave him pass rush grades. He graded really well on those few snaps. So if you're looking for a guy that has already demonstrated coverage ability, but also on passing downs, you throw him on the edge, you move Jadeveon Clowney inside, tack McKinley inside, put Myles Garrett on another edge, you might be able to cause some problems on third and long.
When you look at I asked you about the scenario of the Browns moving up. Do you see there's any scenario where they move back? So they, even potentially out of the first round, where they move back 5-6 spots?
I mean, if I had to bet on one, I would probably bet on that. It would, they could move up. I wouldn't really raise an eyebrow if they did, but if I had to bet on one of the two, I would say that they would move down. If there's not a guy there that they love at 26, I think they'll try and collect more picks. And I don't think they're going to move too far down. I think they'll still want to get a player that can come in and contribute early. But, if all the corners they like are gone, if the edge rushers, if they think they can get a better edge rusher later in the second round, or, if they can drop to day 2 and still get a guy they want, and then add, here's that word again, draft capital down the road, I think they would jump at that opportunity.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. As always, appreciate the time and the insight, Dan. Thanks very much. Draft day next week, I'm sure we will be talking again. Thanks.
Absolutely. It's finally here.
All right. Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Tim Bielik, draft expert, will join us. We will talk to Tim about a couple of more mock drafts. We'll also talk about a cornerback who's very interesting out of Virginia Tech. Sports4CLE. We'll be back. We're talking NFL draft when we return.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions, or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Thanks for hanging with us on Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to shift our attention back to the NFL draft and welcome in Tim Bielik, draft expert for cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. Tim, appreciate the time. So Daniel Jeremiah was asked, what does the signing of Jadeveon Clowney mean for the Browns? And bottom line is, wouldn't rule out an edge rusher. Do you agree?
I think so. I think it's fair to not rule really anything out at 26 because, I mean, Jadavian Clowney is on a one-year deal. He's had some injury issues throughout his career. So there's a reasonable chance that, you know, he could miss time potentially, and you may need another guy to step up. We know Zach McKinley is also a one-year deal. Same kind of situation, had injury issues in 2019, 2020. So given that the edge rushers that could be available, certainly within the realm of possibility. I'm not really in the state where I'm ready to roll a lot of things out, honestly, at 26.
Let me ask you this. You continually look at these edge rushers. Who do you like? Has that changed? I remember the guy that you liked. Who do you like as we talk here a week before the first round's about set to go in Cleveland next Thursday?
Well, my guy's been Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. You know, I know he's getting about 250 pounds at his pro day. Certainly could bulk up a little more. I think he could really fit in very well as the fourth defensive end right now, as a guy who you put in situational pass rush opportunities and give him those kind of snaps, because that's what he's great at right now. He's got great speed. His motor is fantastic. When you get the technical stuff working with him, and when you get him a little stronger, I think that's when you could see, you know, eventually becoming a starter. I've talked about how much I like Jalen Phillips from Miami. You know, there's obviously the medical thing with the concussions, but if he's cleared, then he's got enormous talent. Obviously, Kwity Paye from Michigan, I think, is more of a well-rounded edge guy who plays with a lot of power. Jason Owe from Penn State is the interesting one to me. I think he is the biggest wild card of this position. And I say that because if you look at his athletic numbers, they are absolutely off the charts. Like, guys who are 257 pounds should not be running 4.40. I should say sub 4.40s. That's how athletic he is. I think the question with him comes down to, you know, production. He didn't have a sack in 2020. He had some in 2019. He had some pressures in 2020, but how much is not getting a sack going to really hurt him? So they really have their choice of guys at 26 to pick from if that's the position they want to go for.
Yeah, and, you know, you bring up a good point. We're playing football. We're not running an obstacle course. If we were running an obstacle course, always my pick every day. But playing football, I'm not so sure. Now, you were on a conference call with Daniel Jeremiah, former NFL GM type. He worked in a number of scouting departments. Take me through what he had to say about Caleb Farley and what you think about Farley. Virginia Tech, that's the cornerback, ranked high by a lot of people, but some injury concerns.
Well, I'll start with what Daniel Jeremiah said, and I asked him specifically if he thought, you know, the timing of the back surgery played a role in why he's dropping. I know Jeremiah said he still really likes him, that he's got a chance to be the best corner in this entire draft. And he basically echoed that sentiment that maybe timing has something to do with it, but there's still an injury history. He said that the pick of Farley is going to come then to how a team's medical staff is going to feel about it. Are they going to clear him? Do they think it's too much of a risk, you know, considering he has some injury issues? But if he's healthy, I think he's a guy worth going up and getting if you're the Browns. I've, of course, spoken, I think getting a taller corner before is a great idea to go to pair alongside Denzel Ward, and guys like Caleb Farley who move and have the ball skills that he has at 6'2", about 207 pounds. They don't come around too often. So I think in a lot of ways that could be, to me, that's worth the risk. I know we're about a week out. I've kind of had 4 or 5 different, you know, thoughts of where I would be leaning. This is kind of where I am right now. It could still change in the next week, but right now I'm in the camp of it's probably the best idea to go ahead and gamble and trade up if you can to get Caleb Farley.
What do you like about him? What makes him a guy you kind of identify? What do you like about his game?
I mean, he's got, obviously the size stands out to me. Number one, again, about 6'2". You don't get long corners like him very often. And he's got it's not just that he's tall. He has great corner instincts, and he knows how to play the football. You look at his numbers from 2019, the last season he played, 16 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, and he really did this in his second year as a corner. He redshirted in 2017, moved over from the offense to the defense. He also, of course, had a torn ACL that time, so that kind of plays into some injury concerns with him. But to have the production he had in those 2 seasons is significant, that he's produced. It's not just raw talent. It's not just you're looking at a guy that you see just a projectable frame of 6'2". You're not just looking at hypotheticals. You've seen it on the field for 2 seasons. He's legitimate. There's been a lot of talk up until the last 6 weeks of whether he or Patrick Surtain Jr. from Alabama is going to be the number 1 corner. That's how good Caleb Farley is. I think he's falling because of the injury, and it's fair, to say that, that's right now a concern. It's just going to come down to, I think, how much the Browns trust him, how much the Browns medical staff, trusts where Farley is in his medical state. Is the back healed enough? Do they think it's not going to be an issue long term?
And reports were that the back injury was minor. I don't know that I'd any back injury to an NFL player. I don't know how minor it is, but the reports initially were that it was minor. Correct?
Yeah, I'm 32 years old. I've had back issues before. I can attest that they're no fun. So imagine what it's like if you're going full speed on a football field. So, there are reasons to be concerned. The good news, again, is that it's minor, that you hope it's nothing serious, that he'll get cleared in time. He'll be able to go in training camp. And I think that's probably the best case scenario, is that it's just a normal recovery. He had the surgery a few weeks ago, so it's not like he's having it, say, in the next week or two. That, he's already a month out from surgery. So I think that kind of plays in his favor, along with the fact that, like you said, it was a minor surgery.
Now, let's take best case scenario for the Browns in the draft. We'll do that, and I'll get your worst case after that. But first, best case scenario for the Browns in this upcoming draft.
I think the best case is if Caleb Farley's in the late 20s, and late teens, not the late 20s. If he falls in the late 20s, then something is really going wrong there. But I think as long as one of those corners falls in that area where I would trade up, that's a good way to go. Maybe if one of the edge rush, if you don't trade up, but one of those corners is still available, maybe you have your pick of those top edge rushers, or even a receiver like a Rashad Bateman from Minnesota or Terrace Marshall from LSU is there. If you have about 4 or 5 different options that fall to you at 26, I think that's absolutely ideal. I think that's the place Andrew Berry has shown that he likes to be. He likes to have options available to him.
And worst case scenario, what would be the worst case scenario for this first round of the draft for the Browns?
Well, that's a good question. I think obviously if the 4 corners are gone, and probably even if Asante Samuel Jr., the corner of Florida State, is gone, I think if all 5 of those guys are gone, then really I think there's a pretty sizable drop-off between Samuel and the next corner in this class. Because we know if there's a hole in this team left right now, it's at number 2 corner. You want to get a guy as insurance if something doesn't go right with Greedy Williams, if he doesn't, live up to that second round pick from 2019, if he gets injured again. You don't want to have to necessarily rely on Troy Hill to be an outside guy. He was signed to be an inside guy. That's where he's proven to be at his best. The important thing is they need to leave one of the first or second round, I think, with a corner. And the more guys that are available, especially if it's in the early 20s, I think the better. If one of those guys falls past Tennessee at 22, I think maybe that's a good place to go. And that's a good thing I think Browns fans should be hoping for, is that one of those top 4 guys is available at least after pick 22, because after that, I don't know if any of the other next 3 teams will take a corner.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we will look at a 3-round mock draft done by Chris Trapasso of CBS Sports. That's a recent one today. And then Tim and I going to do a mock simulation right here, the Sports4CLE mock draft simulation. Tim and I will do it. We'll decide who we take at 26, who we take in the second round as well. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking NFL draft just a week away here in downtown Cleveland. Sports4CLE continues. Let's bring back in Tim Bielik, draft expert for cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. And Tim, Chris Trapasso, mock draft for CBS Sports, just out today. 26th overall pick, he has Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame. That's an intriguing one. He's a hybrid kind of guy. A lot of places have him going much earlier. If he's there, what do you think? Is that somebody the Browns look at?
I think he's an interesting player, no question about him. I think the thing with Owusu-Koramoah is because he doesn't have a position technically. I know he's listed as a linebacker, but at about 215, 220 pounds. You know, he's not your traditional linebacker body for the NFL. So maybe he's kind of linebacker safety hybrid. We've seen, you know, how well he can cover, that he's really good at attacking plays downhill, that he really does a lot of different things. He's just a very good playmaker. And I'm of the opinion that you really can't have enough of those guys. But I look at the guys they kind of passed over in this situation to get him. You know, they passed over Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State, Kwity Paye from Michigan to make the move. I don't know if I would personally take Paye in that situation, just to kind of get a developmental fourth guy, at least in right now, because I think Paye's got some technical things to work on rather than just playing with pure power. But him sliding that far would be really interesting. But just looking at Owusu-Koramoah, I think he's a fun player. And it's going to really test Joe Wood's creativity, how he would want to deploy him in this defense. I'd be very fascinated to see how that pans out if he's the pick.
In the second round, this one really had me scratching my head. At 59, they have Brevin Jordan, tight end from Miami, being selected. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a tight end. I would be surprised if they took him day two. I think 6th, 7th round, they may take a tight end they like, but I can't see him taking a tight end this early. Just thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's way too early for a tight end. I'm just looking at the guys that were taken after him. Carlos Basham from Wake Forest. I know he doesn't have a high ceiling necessarily, but he tested very well, and he may be better than I think he is. Peyton Turner from Houston went the pick after Basham. I like him as an edge player. Going further, Milton Williams from Louisiana Tech. Extremely athletic defensive tackle prospect. Even in the third round, he has Jason Owe going 69 to the Eagles, De'Ami Brown 73 to the Panthers, Jabril Cox 75th to the Cowboys, although I don't know if that would happen with Owusu-Koramoah on the board. There's a lot of options there to pass on all those guys and take a tight end, considering you have Austin Hooper. They have Harrison Bryant, who I know he had some moments as a rookie where he kind of struggled. Although historically I've seen it takes 2 years for a tight end to really show himself. This could be David Njoku's last year, so I understand why Chris Trapasso might have been thinking about taking a tight end, but considering who's there at more prudent positions for the Browns, I think this is kind of a head scratcher.
Yeah, I would agree. And then in the third round, they got another linebacker, this time Baron Browning from Ohio State, who that might make sense for the Browns later in that draft. It'll be interesting. But third round, Barrett Browning, just thoughts on that one?
Yeah, he's an interesting player. I mean, obviously, came into Ohio State with a very high pedigree. He was a 5-star player. Didn't have the career you would expect for a 5-star, but had a lot of flashes for it, especially when attacking downhill in the passing game. I think he's at his best as an outside linebacker when he can give him tools, when he can give him opportunities to be in coverage and to go get the running back in those situations. I think he needs some smoothing out. He's still got some rawness to him, but he's just dripping with athleticism. Just such an intriguing player. In this scenario, I think it would be weird to take him after taking Owusu-Koramoah, but if he's your only linebacker you take and you go, if he's there in the 3rd round, not a bad idea in my mind.
All right, we're going to have a little bit of fun now, Tim. So in the control room, Adam and Brian are at the controls, the PFF mock draft simulator. So we're going to have them start it, and they're going to show us who is available as the Browns will draft. So you got to, yep, here we go. They're going through them, and they're flying off the boards as we work our way down to the Browns. And here is who's available. We've got Greg Newsome. We've got Elijah Moore. We've got Jason Owa, Terrence Mitchell Jr., Asante Samuel Jr., Jenkins. You got the tackle from South Dakota, Rondell Moore. All right, Tim Bielik, you see who we have available. Of those players available, who are we taking with our 26th pick in the 1st round? Who do you want?
This hurts me a little because I love receivers. It's probably my favorite position to talk about and write about. And I see Elijah Moore out there, and I just love how explosive he is. I love the Ole Miss receiver factory that's kind of been growing in the past few years with A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf turning into stars right now in the NFL. But I think passing up Greg Newsome would be a little much for me. So rather than take the flashy player and Moore, I go ahead and take a player that I think could fill a bigger role right now in Newsome at 26.
I would agree. So let's go ahead and draft Greg Newsome and see what we have as we make our way down to the 2nd round for the Browns. And this is happening in real time. Sports4CLE mock draft. Tim Bielik and I doing it. And here are our choices. So we've got the big tackle from North Dakota State. You got Molden, really good safety, slot corner type. Davis, the linebacker. Dyami Brown, wide receiver. You got Aaron Robinson, another cornerback. You got Peyton Turner down there. If you like the edge rusher, you got Rashad Weaver as well. So there's some intriguing ones. Who you like with the 59th pick? So 2nd round pick of the Browns. Who intrigues you here?
Oof, I am torn between Dyami Brown of North Carolina and Peyton Turner of Houston. I'm really torn between those two. I've been of the opinion that I think the Browns should take a receiver earlier than most people would think because, again, you've got Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. They're going to be 30 next year. They've got a combined 31 million in cap that are owed to them. But if you look at their contracts, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, but if the Browns were to cut them before June 1st, in between the end of the season and June 1st of 2022, you probably would have very minimal cap hit. So if you were to move on from one of them, it'd probably be easy to do so. Again, I'm not saying they're going to, and I'm not saying they should, but I'm just saying that's kind of the way the contracts work. So I think as much as they could use more depth at defensive end, I am going Dyami Brown. I just love the big play potential he has and how he can really work, not just at the deep level, but I think he's also got some good ability to get yards after the catch.
I would agree. He's a big play type wide receiver. So let's take Dyami Brown with the 2nd. And so as we go through this, our 3rd round pick, we'll only get the first one. As we're running out of time here. They're killing us with our mock draft. As we gotta make it quickly here. We'll only make the first 3rd round pick. And every time I do this, Jamin Davis ends up available with the 3rd round pick. And I think if he's sitting there in the 3rd round, you got to take him. He's been mocked some places as high as the 1st round. Do you agree with Davis in the 3rd?
Yeah, if he falls that far, it'd be a steal to take him. I think he's got a development to take to work on. But I think if he's there with all the tools he has, you'd really want to take him, I think. So he'd be my pick in at 91 real quick. Milton Wayne from Louisiana. That could be my pick. That would just be how I would round out the 3rd round.
All right. As always, Tim Bielik, next week, a week away. Everything we've been talking about for a couple of weeks here, it happens first round of the draft, a week away, Thursday here in downtown Cleveland. Tim, as always, great stuff. Appreciate it. I'm sure we will talk next week as well as we will be in draft week. Again, thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate the insight and really good stuff.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Tim Bielik, draft expert. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. Want to remind you, tomorrow we will be joined by Jeff Risdon, BrownsWire.com. Bobby DiBiasio will also be along as we'll talk something that's going on with Les Levine and a T-shirt that we want you to hear about and get involved with. We will see you again tomorrow. Sports4CLE. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow, Friday.